You can see that it's now being recorded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have a switch off.
Sorry, I was on mute. Shall we start admitting people, or do you want to wait till 1 exactly?
No, I think it's good to do now, and then we have a bit of time. And I'll wait for everyone that's now in the lobby to be in, and then say something.
Perfect.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to this final webinar of the ISPT Steam and Condensate Quality project. We're going to wait for a few more minutes, see if some other people will join, and then we'll get started. All right, it seems like most people have found their way to this Teams meeting. That's good news. So again, welcome everyone to this final webinar of the ISPT Steam and Condensate Quality project. My name is Marjolein. I think a lot of you might recognize my name or know me anyway. I was part of this project for the last couple of years, but other than that, I'll shortly introduce myself because I'll be the one making sure everything runs smoothly today. No one talks too long, and we have some intermezzos here and there. So I work at Ghent University, 10 years this year almost, so it's been a while. And officially now working on the Chair Industrial and Circular Water Technology at Ghent University in collaboration with Evides Industriewater. A few practical things before we get started. Please all mute your microphones and turn off your cameras unless you're a speaker, so that we can make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. If you don't mute your microphone and I notice sound coming from you, I'll mute you anyway, don't worry. But I can't unmute you, so if you then want to say something, you'll have to do that yourself. You can ask questions in between, depending on timing. We'll get to those between presentations or during the Q&A session. I'll make sure that happens. Please put them in the chat, so just type your question in the chat, and I'll pick out some questions to discuss later on. And as a practical note, the webinar will be recorded, so we'll have a link in the end to share with you guys and with people who might have missed parts of this webinar. So for today's program, I'm not operating the slides myself, so I'm waiting for David to move them, which is easy. So welcome and introduction by myself, that's done. And next I'll give the word to Niels to welcome you all and tell you something about the project. Afterwards, we have some of our collaborators and researchers giving you a presentation which will give a very nice overview of the whole project. We'll have a short Q&A session and a break. We'll have a guest presentation by Wilfried Spierenburg, and then a panel discussion with some people, some external people, some people involved in the project, which will no doubt be very interesting. And we aim to end this whole session by 3:45, 4 at the latest. So that's it. Welcome everyone. I hope you'll enjoy this afternoon session. I hope you'll learn something, and we're very happy to present to you what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And now I'll give the word to Niels Groot, water specialist at Dow, who has been coordinating this whole thing for the last couple of years. Niels?
Thanks a lot, Marjolein. Thanks for the introduction. I've been leading this project for the past 4.5 years. ISPT project, Steam and Condensate Quality, which is financially supported by the Ministry of Economic Affairs under the Energy and Water Savings umbrella. Next one, please, Debbie. So I'll give a little bit of background and some of the project objectives, describe how we did our work in this project, and what the deliverables are in a very short notice. As we all know, steam and water are very important in the petrochemical industry, and not only there, but this project has focused on the petrochemical area. Our ability to use water and energy efficiently is largely impacted by steam production and conditioning. You all know that heat transfer and system reliability are largely impacted by preventing corrosion, preventing fouling, and our ability to make that happen, and to reduce our savings, our usage of water and energy. We try to return steam condensates as much as we can. For all these measures, we need, of course, boiler feed water with a pretty stringent specification, especially on organics, and that's one of the major topics in this project. How stringent these specifications should be, could be, and what the impact is if they are not met. Beyond makeup water, we also are adding conditioning chemicals in that steam water cycle, and that these can be pretty conventional ammonia, they can be neutralizing amines, they can be film forming products, and we'll especially focus on the latter part in this project. Next one, please. So if we focus more on the impact of these conditioning chemicals, we really wanted to get more insight in the fate of these conditioning chemicals and to what extent they would contribute to, say, to the formation of, say, detrimental organics impacting corrosion and reliability of the system. Beyond that, we focused quite a bit on polishing condensate and treating condensates to enhance their return, and indeed understand, say, the effects of different organic carbon components in the cycle on the behavior of especially flow accelerated corrosion. Next slide, please. So this is the overall layout of a steam system in the middle. You have the steam system with condensate streams, which are polished and then return into the boiler feed water loop, where the makeup is added by additional demi-water. In between, chemicals are added, and in the steam system, you will create some breakdown products, and these will distribute over the entire system, and that all has been a subject of research in this project. On top of that, we looked at the condensate qualities, how these can be improved, what kind of treatment we would need to make them, say, fit into the entire loop and return them as boiler feed water. We also looked at somewhat more heavy contaminated condensates, whether these could be upgraded to boiler feed water quality. And yeah, with the organics in the system, we specifically looked at the harmfulness of these compounds towards the system integrity. Next one, please. So in these different work packages, we focused on a couple of things, and we actually had two major locations where we focused our research on. Work package 1 and then to some extent 3, we are focused around the Camelot site, where they are using film forming substances as conditioning chemicals. So we looked at the distribution over the system and the long-term impact on the metallurgy. The Dow site was predominantly used to evaluate the treatment of condensates, the off-pack condensates, but also the somewhat more heavy contaminated materials. And then with respect to boiler feed water quality, we had specific work being done on the TUC compounds and related to flow accelerated corrosion phenomena and the impact of TUC compounds on the first condensate quality. And then work package 4, which will be addressed by our colleague from Sitech, will go into the impact of everything we learned in these first 3 work packages and the impact it may have on the on implementation in the chemical industry. Peter Janssen is the one who is going to address that. Something on the deliverables. Last slide, please, Davy. So we got quite a bit more insight on the effects I just mentioned, and as well on the treatment options for condensates. And we shared that already at a number of occasions in different conferences. We are working on scientific papers, mostly through the 2 PhD candidates which are working at U Ghent. And yeah, we also had quite a few master thesis students working on this project as a whole. And with that, I'd like to return it to Marjolein to further elaborate on the different work packages. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Niels, for this introduction. Indeed, we'll now go into more detail of the different work packages. I've had the pleasure to guide 2 of the students that will be presenting today, Sjoe and Irina, the first 2 presenters, and then we have Ben and Peter for the last 2 work packages. So each of them will present their work in about 15 minutes. If you have any questions for them, again, type them in the chat. They'll also all have a poll for you guys, so we can create some interaction and ask you guys some questions as well. So with that, please Sjoe, go ahead and present us your work package.
Yeah, thank you, Malu. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yu from a PhD student from Ghent University. I'm working on the work package 1 under this project, which is the development of analytical protocol and data collection and model verification. And my supervisors are Dr. Marjolein Vanoppen from Ghent and Dr. Andrea Ms2 from KWR Water Research. Also, Professor Emil Cornelissen from Ghent and also KWR, and Professor Arno Belifte from Ghent University. Next one, please. Yes, so as Niels mentioned previously, this is the overview of the project. In the inner circle in blue is the simplified schematic of boiler of a steam water system, and conditioning chemicals are added into the system directly. And the parts in yellow in the outer side is under the work package 1. So I was looking into the thermodegradation products of the conditioning chemicals, also their distribution in the system, and also their impact on the system reliability. Next one, please. Yes. In this study, a steam water system from an ammonia production plant was studied, and the boiler water in this system was previously treated by the combination of hydrogen trisodium phosphate and ammonia. However, 2 failures occurred in the boiler area, so the plant switched the treatment to film-forming amine product-based method. And after the switch, there's no 2 failures occurred anymore till now. Next one, please. So for the film-forming amine product, it's being used in the steam water system now as a corrosion inhibitors. In the plant from the study, they are using ODA as the film-forming amine, which you can see the structure here. On the left side, it's oleopropylene diamine. Normally, this film-forming amine compounds, they are saturated or unsaturated aliphatic carbon chains connected to either primary and or secondary amine group. And here you can see it's an unsaturated carbon chain connected to 1 primary and 1 secondary amine. And on the right side, it's the mechanism of the film forming. So these compounds create a film in the inner surface of the whole system, and to create a barrier between the metal surface and the stream inside to prevent the corrosion. And normally in commercial products, besides film-forming amine, there are also other components in the product. For example, in the product we are using in this plant, there are alkalizing amines to adjust pH, also emulsifiers to maintain the storage stability of the mixture. Next one, please. In work package 1, there are 2 main parts. In the study 1, we look into the thermal degradation products of film-forming amine products. Based on previous studies or literatures, we know this product can break down into organic acids, for example, acetic acid or formate. But there's no study yet to look into the breakdown products with relatively higher molecular weight. So this is the goal of study 1, to focus on the unknown breakdown products from film-forming amine products. And in the second part, we looked into the distribution of organic compounds in the steam water system, and also to try to understand their impact to the system. And next one, please. We performed several sampling campaigns in the study plant, and for specific questions, we also used the lab scale boiler setup to gain more knowledge. And we developed a NetCode protocol on the right side or in the middle with a list of different analytical techniques. And for the first one in blue, it's a liquid chromatography, high resolution mass spectrometry, which I will just refer to it as a LC-MS later on. So this one is mostly or mainly for study 1 to analyze the unknown breakdown products. And for the second part, we combined different other techniques, for example, the basic measurement of pH, conductivity, and TOC. Also the ion chromatography to look into organic acids, and gas chromatography, mass spectrometry for volatile compounds in the system. And the last one is the liquid chromatography to look into alkylizing amines from the FFA product itself. Next one, please. So first of all, I would like to introduce you the study of work of the study 1. This is the simplified schematic of the study plant. You can see there are 14 sampling points spread out through the whole system. It covered the main units of the system, for example, the boiler, turbine, the steam system, and the feed water parts. And for in each sampling rounds, we collect all samples from the same day, and we store the samples afterwards in under 4 degrees Celsius, and then to run the analysis as soon as possible. Next one, please. And to know or to analyze the unknown breakdown products, we developed a non-target screening method based on this LC-MS. We used 2 columns to cover polar and less polar compounds, and also we used 2 ionization modes to have positively charged and also negatively charged compounds. And both of this is to cover as much compounds as possible from in the samples to have a larger overview. And from the graph below, you can see the basic idea of this method. So when the columns are used to separate the mixture of compounds in the samples, they're separated into different groups, and then after the ionization, in the end, it gives the signal of each compound. For example, if the first peak is a FFA, the film-forming amine, and for the other peaks, they are from unknown breakdown products. So what we wanted to know is to have more information of these compounds, for example, their molecular weight, their formula, and furthermore structures, and in the end to really identify these compounds. Next one, please. In the system, we know normally in steam water system there are various sources of organic compounds. For example, the natural organic matter from makeup water, or from process contaminants, or from other sources in the system. And what we want to look into as the last one is the breakdown products of FFA. So then to really pick out the compounds from the last group, the breakdown products, we need to cluster the whole compounds in the sample and then really take out interesting parts. And the figure on the left side is the result from the non-target screening analysis. And you can see it as a combination of various cells, and each column represents each sampling point, and each row represents each feature, or I would say each compound in the sample. And each row, the signal of each row are normalized, so you can tell the relative concentration based on their color. So the more blue the cell is, it means the lower concentration it has, and of course the more red, the higher concentration. And for example, if we look at the first group on the top, it had, for all the rows, it has a red response, in P10, which is the process condensate sampling point. So it means the group from the top, they are actually organic compounds from process condensate. So this is the idea how we cluster different compounds. And for the breakdown products, we would think the thermodegradation undergo under high temperature. So we assume there are more of these compounds in the steam part, or it just spread out through the system. So to meet this criteria, we've selected 2 small groups with a really little bar. Could you click one more? Yes. So if we take out the rows meet this request, so we selected 6 compounds in the end. And if we go to the next slide, it's to identify these compounds, we use the LCMS results. On the left side, it's the Ms2 Spectra. So it's the tandem mass spectrometry, mass spectrometry, and each peak in this spectra, it represents a fragment of the compound. And in the table in the middle, you can see the structures highlighted for each peak. For example, the first peak with the number 57, you can see it's actually from the 4 carbon parts in the structure column. And by collecting all the substructures, we put them together. And in the end, in the last row, you can see the structure of the complete compound. And by comparing this structure to with the different composition in the film forming amine product, we realize this structure is really close to the emulsifier structure, which is on the most right side. And then we can say these breakdown products are actually from the emulsifier in the FFA product. So this is how we analyze or identify a breakdown product and also trace back the source of it. And next slide, please. And now I would like to show you the results from study 2. In this study, we looked into the distribution of all organic compounds in the system. And we have this techniques in yellow to enable the coverage or analysis of different groups of compounds. Next slide, please. Before I go into details, I would like to ask you a question. So what do you think is the major organic compound in the steam water system? And it's a poll, so you can follow a link which should be sent into the conversation. Yes, so if you follow the link, and then you can choose the option that you think. Yes, so now we have voting for conditioning chemicals, also process contaminants. So until now it's still the conditioning chemicals are you think they are the major organic compounds in the system. There are more coming for the natural organic matter, also others, yes. So in general, all these 4 groups, they exist in the plant. So it's just interesting to know, and also I'm sure it's different from plant to plant. It depends on their process or their treatment. So I would say now, I guess for most people or for the plants that you are working in, it's the conditioning chemicals you think is the major one. So if we go to the next slide. Is it okay to go to the next slide? Or should we stop the poll first? Yeah, so in the beginning, I also thought it's the conditioning chemicals. So for the analytical methods, it covers the yellow bar is the alkylizing amine. So yeah, the organic compounds from the FFA product. And the pink bar is organic acids, which is the breakdown or the known breakdown by then. Sorry for the ring. From the FFA. But actually, if you compare the concentration of these two to the TOC analysis, in most of the points, it's only around 20%. So then we were thinking what are missing here. And if you go to the next step, David, thanks. Yeah, so after communicate with the plants, the steam were actually sent to the production site, ammonia production site, and the methanol is one of the side products of the process, and it comes back with the steam, and because it's a neutral compound, so it cannot be removed by the CPU. So then we include this methanol into our the analytical protocol, and then in the end we got almost 100%, or let's say higher than 90% TOC coverage in the system. So then in the plant I studied, the major organic compounds is actually the methanol from the process. And as now we know this, then the important question will be, is it stable in the system? And if we go to the next slide, we used a lab scale experiment to look into this question. So we used the flow rate to have the similar residence time as the steam system in the plant, and also, of course, the similar pH environment. And then we use the condition of low pressure steam drum, high pressure steam drum, and also the high pressure steam system, which we think if there is a thermal degradation, it could happen in these three conditions. And if we go to the next slide, yes, and this is the result of the experiment, and the blue bar is feed sample, and the purple bar is the condensate sample. And we can see it's only under the high pressure steam system condition there are significant decrease of methanol from feed to condensate. So it means it undergo thermal degradation, and it's 0.8 ppm of methanol degraded from 13 in total. And we got also 10 ppb of formate formation. And for the other carbons, we assume it goes to CO2 based on literatures. Because the formate and CO2, they are easily can change the pH of the stream. So we looked back into the results of the pH measurements of this sampling points, and actually the pH was maintained very well within the guideline. So although there are certain amount of methanol degradation, but with the protection of FFA products, it didn't really give threats to the system. Next slide, please. From this work package one, we developed a liquid chromatography high resolution mass spectrometry method to analyze FFA and also the degradation products of FFA products. And in the result, we didn't find any corrosive breakdown products. By using the developed analytical protocol, we can cover higher than 90% of organic compounds in the system. And in this study plant, we know the major organic compounds is actually methanol from process. And then, of course, there's no threats given by this methanol or the main TOC contributor in the system. Yeah, these are the main results from work package one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on time, so perfect timing to go to the next presentation. If there's any questions for you, we'll handle them during the Q&A after the presentations. And I see that our next speaker is also ready to present. Irina, you've turned on your camera, perfect. So go ahead and tell us some more about work package 2.
Hi, thank you very much, Mario, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Irina Veleva, and today I would like to present to you an overview of my PhD research on the topic technologies for treatment and recovery of petrochemical condensates. Next slide, please. But before we start with today's presentation, I would like to ask you a question. Is the membrane aerated biofilm reactor concept a suitable possibility for treatment of petrochemical streams? Okay. Okay. That's a 50-50 answer. Yes. So the majority of the votes show for yes. And I would like to also ask you another question. Next slide, please. What is your opinion? Is direct contact membrane distillation an efficient way to recover heat and water from petrochemical condensates? Yeah, so the majority of the votes round up equally between. So we have a yes also for the second technology. So I definitely hope that you like these questions, and I also hope that I will provide you with sufficient information to verify these findings in the following slides. Like the rest of the society, petrochemical plants are also facing the global water crisis by increasing the recovery of their waste streams on the site of the plant. This will lower the amount of freshwater sources which is used, and also increase the amount of recovered water on site. This, for instance, in the case of the outer nozzle, will increase the ratio of recovered water from 80% to approximately 100%. With that said, one of the biggest condensates became a subject of interest, the dilution steam blowdown. This condensate originates from the naphtha cracking process itself, and it is characterized as heavily contaminated with organic pollutants, but there is still available heat in it. This condensate is currently treated at the wastewater treatment plant, but in order to release some treatment capacity and to recover the water and the available heat, we tested two different innovative alternative technologies. One of them, membrane aerated biofilm reactor, and the other one, direct contact membrane distillation. We also tested the efficiency of polishing technologies to bring the final quality of the condensate, if possible, to boiler feed water and to close the steam condensate cycle. Next, please. This condensate in the process has a temperature of around 130 degrees and a total organic carbon pollution of 100 milligrams per liter. There are four main pollutants inside: phenol, acetate, propionate, and formate. These four pollutants together result in around 50% from the total TUC in the stream. Next slide, please. To treat the dilution steam condensate blowdown, we tested an Oxymem DuPont brand MABR. This is a biological treatment process which is based on a bubble-less aeration through hollow fiber membranes. In the case of Oxymem, these membranes are non-porous, dense membranes. They also serve not only as aerators, but as surface on which biofilm can grow and develop, as shown in this scheme. And also the transport of oxygen across the membrane is dictated by the biofilm demand through diffusion. Because of that, the higher the demand, the greater the oxygen transfer rate through the membrane. Also, because of the countercurrent supply of oxygen and pollutants, a stratified biofilm can develop, and simultaneous nitrification denitrification. Last but not least, the bubble-less aeration also minimizes the stripping of volatile organic carbons, which is very crucial for the treatment of petrochemical streams. Next slide, please. To test the efficiency of this technology, we used an Oxymem MABR twin pilot system. This pilot consisted of 2 identical reactors, which were operated in series, and each of them had 20 square meters of membrane area. At the beginning, we chose a hydraulic retention time per reactor of 10 hours, and this resulted in a TOC load of 0.7 grams per 20 square meters of the first reactor per day. The system was designed and operated on an overflow principle, and the effluent leaving the second reactor was considered as a treated stream. The removal efficiency achieved by the reactors in sequence was defined as the overall removal efficiency. Next slide, please. For the majority of the tested time, we applied the above-mentioned loading and hydraulic retention time. But after that, some preliminary calculations were made to compare the applied conditions at pilot scale to what will be expected on a full-scale MABR system. These preliminary calculations projected much higher loading and much shorter HRT on full scale. To test some conditions which are more comparable to full scale, we increased the load to the pilot by inserting a synthetic mixture of the main 4 pollutants and gradually increasing their concentration. This was done in 2 phases. Next, please. In phase 1, the total load to the pilot still resembled the starting point of 0.7, and at hydraulic retention time of 10 hours, the system in series removed around 88% of the TUC. Next, please. During the second phase, while increasing the concentration of the 4 main pollutants, the total load to the system reached values of 1.6, and still at HRT of 10 hours, the reactors in series again removed around 88%. Next, please. During the third phase, while trying to maintain the TUC load as constant as possible, the hydraulic retention time of each reactor was shortened to 3.3 hours. In this phase, we can see that the shorter HRT had more pronounced effect on the system, and the removal efficiency dropped to 65%. Next, please. By adding each of these chemicals individually, this gave us the opportunity to evaluate also their removal efficiency through the pilot. In the case of phenol, for instance, in the 3 phases, the reactors in series were able to remove phenol with a removal efficiency of 80 to 100%. Next, please. The same was true also for the 3 added acids. Acetate and propionate and formate were degraded by the reactors in series with efficiency of 80 to 100%, with some small exceptions when the feed concentration of propionate and formate were very, very low, and they were very close to the lower limit of detection of the equipment. This led to low calculated removal efficiencies, but very high actual performance of the system. Next slide, please. Based on these observations and the collected data, the performance curves of the pilot were built. These curves represent the dependence between the loading and the removal efficiency. For instance, if what was loaded to the system was completely removed, the obtained data points will lie on a 45-degree straight line, which is the case for the 3 acids below and phenol, the graph to the right. On the other hand, if what was dosed to the system was not completely degraded by the biology, with time, the obtained data points will start to shift away from the straight line. The latter was relevant for the TOC removal rate. Based on that, it could be concluded that the maximum efficiency of the pilot is achieved in series at maximum loading capacity of TOC equal to 0.7 grams per 40 square meter per day. At these conditions, the reactors in series removed around 80% of the TOC. The rest of the 20% was defined as hardly biodegradable TOC. At these settings, the system in series was also capable to remove the rest of the control pollutants with efficiency of 90%. Next slide, please. For the treatment of the dilution steam blowdown condensate, we also tested membrane distillation. Membrane distillation is a temperature difference-driven process, and it uses hydrophobic membranes. These membranes allow only the passage of vapors. To test the efficiency of this technology, we used a lab-scale direct contact membrane distillation. And because of the complexity of the real dilution steam condensate, we used a synthetic feed. We tested the efficiency of polyethylene hydrophobic membrane, but we also examined the performance of polyethylene oleophobic membrane. These are membranes which are characterized with higher rejection against chemicals with wetting properties. Such properties have, for instance, oils and surfactants, which are often present in petrochemical streams. We tested a variety of conditions, but the tabulated settings are the conditions at which the highest flux, together with the higher rejection efficiency, were achieved. For the oleophobic membrane, it showed lower flux but higher rejection efficiency compared to the hydrophobic, which was expected. Most importantly, with the hydrophobic membrane, we experienced membrane wetting, which gradually lowered the distillate quality and also proved the superiority of the oleophobic membrane. Next slide, please. Knowing about the limits, the advantages and disadvantages of these two technologies, we also evaluated the possibility to combine them for the treatment of the dilution steam blowdown condensate in a theoretical manner. This resulted in the creation of two scenarios. As it can be seen from these figures, the first case will require more cooling before the condensate is sent to the biological treatment step, compared to case 2. On the other hand, the first scenario offered the advantage of high removal efficiency of phenol and other organics, which can be sent to the membrane distillation unit afterwards, and it will also minimize the stripping and also the wetting potential on the membrane distillation. To prevent from stripping and evaporization, for instance of phenol, a high pH will be required to shift the dissociation of phenol from a non-ionic to ionic form. For instance, in the first case scenario, this won't be necessary. Because of that, case 1 looks more economically attractive than case 2. On the other hand, because of the low single-pass recovery rate of dilution steam of direct contact membrane distillation, and also because of the high operational costs of the MABR system, these two technologies and these two scenarios can be characterized as economically intensive. Next slide, please. To put it in a perspective, we tested the treatment of dilution steam blowdown condensate through direct contact membrane distillation with synthetic feed. What we concluded from this experiment that no volatiles and no chemicals with wetting properties should be present in the feed. This technology is able to produce process water quality, but because of the low single-pass recovery rate, it's very economically intensive. The same final quality for reuse was produced by the Oxymem MABR system in series, but furthermore, because this technology has high operational costs, it's also evaluated as economically intensive. Moreover, the effluent from the MABR system would require further polishing if the water is to reused as high grade. To do that, we tested a variety of technologies, amongst which reverse osmosis BW30 membrane, and also hydrophobic oleophobic membranes in direct contact membrane distillation. Special attention needs to be paid also on the biofouling potential on the membranes and also the interactions of the chemicals with the used membranes. Next slide, please. We also tested and looked into theoretical options how to recover the heat that is present in the dilution steam blowdown. To do that, we first need to know how much heat is existing in the stream and also what is its availability. For instance, some process turnarounds need to be considered, but also special attention has to be paid to the corrosiveness of the condensate when heat recovery is a subject of interest. There are different methodologies to do that. For instance, heat exchangers, the conversion of the heat to mechanical and then electrical energy. The direct conversion to electrical energy is also an option, but very expensive. And at the end, this heat can be used for domestic purposes or on-site. Next slide, please. Last but not least, the fate of slightly contaminated condensate streams was also briefly covered in the scope of the current research. These condensates are originating from turbine and cooling loops, and they are mainly contaminated with minor organic and inorganic impurities, which result from the breakdown of corrosion inhibitors. They are currently treated in condensate polishing units, which consist of mixed bed ion exchange resins, but they are causing suspected biofouling, which subsequently increases the pressure drop on the CPUs. Because of that, they need to be polished, and finding the best treatment trains to pre-treat these streams was a main goal and research in the improved Interreg project. In this project was concluded that the treatment train granular activated carbon plus aerol plus mixed bed has the best performance, but on the other hand, the combination between strong acid cations plus mixed bed was the most economical feasible. Next slide, please. To summarize, the biggest objective of this research is to find novel technologies to increase the steam condensate return ratio. To respond to that, we tested MABR and DCMD, and they both produce a process water quality for reuse, but they have their limitations. They were both defined as economically intensive. On the other hand, in terms of the slightly contaminated condensates, in the scope of the improved Interreg project, was proven that through slight polishing, the currently applied treatment can become more robust and it can continuously supply high-quality water for reuse. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Any questions are welcome.
Thank you very much, Irina, for your presentation. We'll keep the
you.
questions for the Q&A session afterwards. So to anyone, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat or even just put a Q in the chat, and then I know I'll have to give you the word if you have a question later on. So thanks again, Irina. We'll go on to the next speaker, which is Ben. I can already see he turned on his camera, so I'm guessing he's good to go. Ben, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks, Marjolein. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, nice to see some familiar faces, or actually circles, colored circles with initials in them. My name is Ben. I'm a master's student from the TU Delft. My supervisors on this project were Henry Spanjers, Arja Mol, and Ralf Lindeboom from the TU Delft, and it was supervised by Sonja Vidosevic from Belgrade University, and last but not least, David Moot and Arne Verliefde from the U Ghent, and David from Evides, both part of this project. And I will tell you about the impact of the conditioning chemicals on the corrosion phenomena, work package 3. First, I would, click please. First, I would like to relate the work package to the other work packages. So work package 1 provided an insight on the phase and the condition of chemicals in the water steam cycle, while work package 2 provided insights on the novel methods to treat the contaminated condensate. Well, work package 3, this work package assesses the impact of these boiler feed water treatments and conditioning on the risks in the water steam cycle, with a focus on the corrosion phenomena. So as is known or was explained, there are a few compounds of FFA which can, or FFA can break down in a few compounds which are acidic for the system and potentially can cause corrosion. Secondly, it was shown that these acidic corrosive compounds also distribute into the condensate, and if not treated well enough, it can re-enter the system again via the feed water. So therefore, we want to assess this the corrosion caused by FFA with dedicated corrosion measurements. But first of all, I would like to tell something more about corrosion. So there are various types of corrosion possible within the water steam cycle. So short, actually a metal is not stable within an aqueous environment. It wants to corrode or dissolve into iron ions or into an iron oxide. And this iron oxide can again form a protective layer, but more about that later. So in the picture we see actually the electrochemical reaction of the corrosion. Oh, sorry, I needed to say click. So here we see the various types of corrosion, and on the picture we see the schematic of a corrosion happening. So the iron dissolves, forming iron ions, ferrous ions, ferric irons. There are several forms of corrosion within the water steam cycle: pitting corrosion, crash-fist corrosion, stress corrosion, cracking, hydrogen embrittlement, first condensate corrosion, and lastly flow accelerated corrosion, on which we will focus more because this is a very common corrosion and very severe corrosion within the system. And how does this corrosion work and how can it be mitigated? Click, please. Oh, thank you. So as I told before, metal is not stable within an aqueous system, and within the aqueous system of a water steam cycle, the most stable iron oxide found is magnetite due to the high temperatures, low oxygen content, and high pH rate. Oh, another fan. Excuse me. So magnetite forms in two ways, in two layers simultaneously, as seen on the picture: a lower, denser layer forming where the metal used to be, and on top a more porous layer. So the magnetite layer forms actually protects the bare metal underneath against further corrosion, but the flow accelerated corrosion, so the flow and actually the turbulence of this corrosion together with a certain temperature causes the top porous layer to dissolve or be eroded away, hence again increasing the corrosion rate. FSC is dependent on certain parameters. First of all, temperature around 100 to 200 degrees, flow turbulence, pH, low pH that dissolves the magnetite layer, and of course the material, carbon steel in this question. The sensitive regions for FEC are the feed water system, condensate system, and the low pressure boiler tubes. So how can this FEC be mitigated and the layer be protected? Next slide, please. So the current protection against FEC or against corrosion in general is actually making sure this magnetite layer is as stable as possible by increasing pH and lowering the oxygen content. Now this is done by dosing ammonia or other alkalizing agents, or reducing the oxygen content, namely by removing oxygen or with oxygen scavengers. Actually, single-phase FEC can be reduced or stopped by introducing oxygen to the system, called oxygenated treatment. This stifles the oxide layer because hematite is formed, another iron oxide, but this is not always possible, namely for two-phase FEC regions, because in two-phase FEC there's also a gas phase instead of only a water phase, and the oxygen will go into the gas phase. And for complex boiler systems, or tongue twister, I will say mixed metal systems. But in that case, OT is not always possible, but let's ask the plant operators themselves. If you're not using oxygenated treatment, what is your reason? And you can enter a response. Now maybe everybody's using OT. Oh. No, make quality good enough. So maybe we have one plant operator among us. or we will leave this to the discussion. Luckily, besides OT, there's another way to mitigate corrosion, as told before, FFA, namely OLDA or octadecilamin ODA. Their properties can be used to cover the surface and in that respect protect against corrosion. But as told before, these film-forming compounds can also disintegrate or hydrolyze into corrosive products, which brings us to the main question. Can the implementations of film-forming amines be justified in spite of the limited breakdown and formation of organic acids, such as acetic acids? And this was broken down into in this work package into two objectives. First of all, immersion tests to assess the formation of a protective magnetite layer with and without the film-forming on-carbon steel. And then subsequent re-immersion tests under acidic FEC to test the magnetite layers. So before going to the results, I will firstly shortly explain the setup and the method. Click, please. So here we can see the high temperature, high pressure autoclave. So in the middle, we see this autoclave containing a test solution of interest with the coupon holder holding the steel coupons, the C1010 carbon steel. First of all, with the immersion test, with certain chemicals added to them, we will form a magnetite layer on these chemicals. Afterwards, these compounds or magnetite layers will be assessed with various analytical methods. Then they will be re-immersed into the autoclave again at a temperature of 150 degrees and with the mixer, which we can see in the middle, causing flow conditions and with some acetic acid added to it to cause a pH of 25 of 6. Next slide, please. So here we can see a short table of the experimental methods. So the re-immersion or actually immersion tests were with the following compounds of interest: a blank chemistry as a reference, ammonia with ODA added to it, a film former. The third one was an ammonia plus ODA chemistry, and the last one was the ammonia only chemistry. So runs X.1 were the immersion tests, and runs X.2 were the re-immersion tests. And after each test, the layer was examined via various methods, which will pass in the results sections. Click, please. So the first method we used to examine the layers was XRD. This is X-ray diffraction, and X-ray diffraction was used to actually verify that we have a magnetite layer present. So after each run, this was done, and we found for all the runs that there's iron present and magnetite and no other compounds. Just we can be surely sure that we're only discussing magnetite. For the next slide, please. Now we used SEM, scanning electron microscopy to get a better view of the layer themselves, of the surface morphology. And what is interesting is that we can see on the left picture, we can see the surface of the coupon after the immersion test where we formed the layer with a blank chemistry. You can see the secondary layer, the coarse layer forming the crystals all over the coupon surface. Compared to the right picture where the layers examined after the OLDA immersion test, so forming the layer with OLDA present besides ammonia, we can see at certain points there is not this growth of the secondary layer. This can be due to the film former covering these parts, and on the parts where the layer is growing, we can see extra big crystals. But how does this layer hold up in acidic FEC? Next slide, please. Oh, Davey, next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. On the left, we can see the blank immersion again. So this layer formed under the blank chemistry, and then we tested it in the re-immersion test under pH 6 with the flow conditions. And what we see clearly on the right picture is that the crystals have been eroded away or dissolved. So this layer is actually not holding up well within these conditions. For instance, in the next slide, click. Next slide, please. There's maybe one slide back, Davey. Yeah, thanks. On the next slide, we can see the layer formed with ODA present, the immersion on the left. So we can again see some crystals forming. But with respect or with regard to the layer formed with the blank after the re-immersion test with ODA, or actually the layer formed with ODA, we can see actually that the crystals, the secondary layer, is holding up quite well. There's are less or actually no signs of corrosion or erosion. So this is all pictures of the surface, but we would like to also see the layer and be more quantitative. Therefore, we will go to the next slide. Thanks. On the left, we can see an embedded cross-section of the blank formed coupon. So the coupon formed under blank conditions. On top, we see the polymer, followed by the iron oxide and then the carbon steel. EDS, let me see, quickly search. EDS analysis was used to actually verify, EDS stands for energy dispersive spectroscopy, was used to verify if the layer present or the layer which we think is the iron oxide layer really is the iron oxide layer. So this shows a lot of elemental oxygen present, hence we can assume that this is the magnetite layer in question. So now we know that we can compare these layers in the next slide. Click. And here on the left we can see the blank layer formed under the blank chemistry, the immersion tests, and on the right we can see the layer formed with ODA present. And what is most notably on first sight is that the ODA formed layer is much more smooth, homogeneous, and well, less rough. Moreover, if you closely look at the magnification, this layer is also a bit thinner. This is also in accordance with literature and will be representative also for the ODA. So we will go on to the next slide, where we used the SEM input together with the weight loss measurements to determine the layer thickness, to have some numbers. On the left, A, we can see the SEM determined thicknesses, and B, we can see the thickness determined by weight loss. So first of all, what I want to say is actually, or I want to point out, is the reduction in the layer thickness. So first run 1.1, the layer was formed, and after run 1.2 or x.2, the layer was examined after the acidic FEC conditions. And what we can see in the case of graph A was a reduction for the blank of 19%, ODA 15%, ODA plus ammonia 15%, ammonia plus ODA 9%, and a surface layer reduction with ammonia of 23%. So in this case, the layer reduction, or the layers formed under the FFA presence, are reduced less. And this trend is also seen in graph B, where the layer formed under the blank chemistry is reduced with 16%, and the layer formed with ammonia is reduced 3%. The layers formed with ODA and OLDA are actually increasing after the FBC test with about 4 to 3%. And now the SEM input and the weight loss measurement was also used to determine the corrosion rate. And this can be seen in the next slide. Click. And here we can see on the left the SEM determined corrosion rate, and on the right, B, we can see the corrosion rate determined via weight loss. Again, there are two trends to be seen. First trend for both is actually that this corrosion rate is reduced by half, because the first corrosion rate was determined after the immersion test, and the second corrosion rate was determined after the re-immersion test over the whole period of length, so immersion test and re-immersion test combined. And we see that roughly this corrosion rate is divided by 2, meaning that actually all these layers, except for the layer formed under the blank chemistry, are quite protective of the bare metal underneath. But how do the layers themselves hold up within these acidic FEC conditions? This is seen in the next slide. Click. So here we can see the loss in weight determined before and after each run. So after the immersion or re-immersion run, the loss of the coupon in milligram per coupon was determined, and this can include either the loss of the oxide layer or either the loss of the bare metal underneath. And what is noticeable is that during the formation runs, so the immersion runs, the less material was lost with the blank chemistry, This might indicate that the crystals formed under the blank chemistry form quicker, and therefore a lot of materials redeposited again on the coupon. But what is therefore afterwards very good to see is that after the re-immersion experiments, especially when the layer was formed with a film former present, there's almost no loss of material, hence also almost no loss of the oxide. And in case of the blank run, there's a lot of loss of material after the re-immersion test. And for ammonia, there's also some loss to be detected. So we will go to our next slide, because we are very, well, oh, this is a funny effect. Very, maybe, how do you say, we want to know if the effect of the better layer is caused by the film former being present. And the film former, they has a hydrophobicity characteristics, and this can be determined via contact angle analysis. Contact angle analysis shows the drop, and the higher the contact angle, the higher the hydrophobicity. So on the left of this graph, we can see the reference contact angles, non-treated, treated with ODA, and treated with OLDA. And this also corresponds with the contact angle after the immersion and re-immersion experiment. We see OLDA having the highest, followed by ODA is actually decreasing in the re-immersion experiment, this contact angle, and then ammonia. The blank also has a fairly high contact angle, but this could be explained by experiments performed prior to these experiments, also using OLDA. So this could have contaminated the autoclave a little bit because it's very sticky. And for our last slide, or our last analysis, we see we've used digital microscopy because there were some noticeable features on the coupons, and this could appear to be spalling of the magnetite. So we've seen corrosion of the very tiny particles, of the very tiny crystals, but on a bigger level there could be some well, actually flakes eroding off the surface, especially near where the mixer was, having the highest turbulence. So on the left we can see the blank after the re-immersion. The darker part is the magnetite, and the gold shiny parts might indicate the steel underneath. This could also be seen for the OLDA with re-immersion and ammonia with re-immersion. None of this could be detected with the ODA after re-immersion. So now we have examined the layers with a lot of different methods. Now it's time to conclude in the next slide. So for the conclusions, under all chemistries, a protective layer is formed on the carbon steel. Layers formed with the FFA present are smoother and have a smaller porous part. All layers offer corrosion protection of the base material during the re-immersion tests. So layers formed under FFA chemistry offer the best protection against the acidic FEC. The acidic FEC with acetate being present. Layers formed with additives, especially FFA, are not to almost not affected by the presence of the acidic acid and the flow during the re-immersion tests. OLDA offers a bit more and lasting hydrophobicity and better protection against acidic FEC, while the ODA layer did not show any signs of oxide particle erosion or spalling. Summarized, in addition to the FFAs, result in a stronger, more protective magnetite layer, which are more resistant to acidic FEC conditions. So the main question, if the FFAs can be implemented despite their breakdown products, short answer, yes. There's also, of course, a longer answer, but I would like to leave it with this. And to conclude with a nice poll in the next slide, because FFA holds a small surprise as it is a surfactant, it can also affect iron oxide particles already in the water phase, so colloids, and maybe have an effect on the fouling of these particles within the boiler. So the question is, could FFA increase fouling? Yes, because it decreases the surface charge of the particle, therefore promotes coagulation. Yes, promotes flocculation of the iron oxide particles by being a big molecule. No, increases the surface charge, therefore more repulsion between iron oxide particles, hence no coagulation. or no acts as a dispersant. So this was also investigated in my thesis, but there's no time to discuss this. This will be a small teaser. I think we will close. So there's a tie between the A and C. I would shortly like to give a small answer. It's a bit more complicated, so for that you need to maybe join my thesis graduation presentation. It's maybe could be all of them.
Thank you, Ben, to leave us at such a cliffhanger. I'm sure we can share your graduation paper as well afterwards, hopefully maybe with the participants, and they can read the answer. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're running a little bit behind, but no worries. There's lots of buffer built in, so we'll leave the questions for later. And then I'd like to give the word to Peter. Maybe Dewi, you can go. Yeah, thank you. To the next slide. So Peter is going to take us through what they have learned from this project from the side of the petrochemical industry. So we're moving away from all us university folk and going into application. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marjolein. For the people who are not knowing me, I am Peter Janssen, working for Sitech Services at the Chemalot site in Geleen, and we service a lot of chemical plants in the Chemalot site. So some takeaways and lessons learned. For these, first of all, thanks for the 3 people who did a lot of investigation and a lot of research work with all these conclusions. Next slide. So what work process 1, we developed a complete analytical screening. A different kind of analytic methods are used to measure almost 90% of the TOC that give us at the Chemalot site a good view of what is present inside all these water streams in this high pressure steam system. Around 4,600 organic features are found in these samples. That means that a lot of organic is present, but what is happening with that organic and what is doing it? We are treating the system with film-forming amines, and 6 of them are identified as degradation products. But at the moment, in these film-forming amines, no acids are found. But in the system we are using, there are acids present, and we know now that it is coming from process condensate. For instance, methanol, what is coming out of the process, and that is going to the condensate polishing unit we are using. This was also proven by Sue in boiler experiment. So the outcome of this work process gives us an in-depth understanding of what is happening in our high pressure steam system. And we also know that critical corrosion breakdown acids are detected, but on a very low level. And with the current film-forming amide treatment, corrosion is at the moment not observed. We are using this film-forming amide since 2013. Also in this project, we want to have some model verification. So there was also some work done by Caroline and Sue to look at first condensation corrosion, but on a lab scale to check for first condensate corrosion is very difficult. Also, the sample collection was very difficult, but they did some testing already, and then you can see that the acids that are present in the steam are condensate earlier than the ammonia what was used in this system to treat the system. So ammonia wants to stay in the gas phase, and the acids are going to stay in the liquid phase. So you can have with ammonia first condensate corrosion. This is also according to what we find in the theory and the literature. Next slide. So a question, a poll. We have 33 people here, so a lot working in the steam system treatment or in the chemical companies. What kind of steam treatment do you use? because this project was based mostly on the film-forming amines. And in the industry, you see the industry is very conservative, and always phosphate treatment is a treatment what is still present in the old chemical industries. But you see not film-forming amines at the moment. So are we the only one in the world on it? Okay. Go to the next one. Yeah. In work process 2, Irina did a lot of good work about membrane for cleaning contaminated process stream. For instance, for hydrocarbons. These membranes techniques are feasible and have potential, but need to further investigation is needed, or based on what kind of feed you need, how to treat the effluent, higher recovery rate, and also in relation to temperature. So for heavy contaminated process stream, these membrane technologies are feasible, but they are also economically intensive and expensive. But the water what can come out of these membrane treatment is that you can use it as cooling water, or as fire extinguished water, or can give it back to the process stream. So the technique is feasible, but when you want to use this water as boiler feed water, then an extra cleaning step is necessary. For simply condensate streams, the best performance was with granular active carbon, reverse osmosis, and mixed bed. But that are three as a combination what is very expensive. The most technically economically feasible, that is strong acid cation and mixed bed. That is also what we use in our industry, but based on this test results, there is a future for membrane technology. Next slide. What kind of concept, next poll, what kind of process condensate cleaning system do you use? And I think ion exchange will be the most, but maybe there are others. So membrane is not a technology what is at the moment used in these systems, but maybe in the future this will be a possibility. Next slide, please. Then we have the work process 3, boiler feed water quality requirements. Ben did a good research on the laboratory for flow accelerated corrosion, and that's film-forming amines work better than ammonia. With the film-forming amines, you get a stronger and better magnetite layer. And from different kind of film-forming amines, the older is at this moment the best what was coming out. In our system, we use film-forming amines based on older, and it gives a better corrosion protection also in the test results on the lab, but also in our boiler feed water system. What always is important when you use these products, be sure that always these film-forming amines are present in the complete system, so that you get the film continuously in activity. Also check the water for acid conductivity and pH. And when you are out of these limits, check for acids by ion chromatography. That is what we learned out of these work processes. And also in a lot of guidelines, TUC is a guideline and also a limit what we have used on the Chemelot side, but that is not always valid when you use film-forming amines. because film-forming amides are good organics in relation to the acids, what we don't want, but they are present. In our system also, with film-forming treatment, is a condensate polishing system necessary, because when we treat the complete system and the film forming, we don't want to use more than necessary, and we want to recycle these film forming amides so we can spare some water. We go to the next slide. Do you have corrosion in your steam system? If yes, which? Of nobody have corrosion in the steam systems. So based on that flow accelerated corrosion, just what Ben has researched on, is one of the biggest, and the most is no tube failure of no corrosion. The next slide, please. Summarized, we got a better insight of the steam water system by using a lot of different analytical measurements. And in practice, we say always the results must be combined with an expert judgment and also the necessary process information. Every chemical industry has its own process contaminations, so you have to look what is really happening in your system and what is coming in tight. Based on the membrane techniques, you can use them, and there are progress inside. And in the future, this will be a better technique to maybe clean heavy contaminated process streams. But I think in the future you need always the water coming out of these membrane distillations. You need also an extra cleaning step. Strong acid cation plus mixed bed is still the best economical feasible cleaning method for these slightly contaminated condensate streams. For our systems, film forming amide treatment is proven. It gives a good corrosion protection for high pressure steam systems. In the world, there is a very conservatism of using these products, but that is not always justified based on the research what we did in this work project. Good guidelines are still necessary. What is a good pH? Is the pH important? What kind of acids you can accept? And how do you use these film forming amides? That is very important, what we learned out of this process. I want to thank the people, Ben, Irina, and Sue, for their excellent work. And this is the final. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's always interesting to hear how the research translates to practice, of course. That leaves us with 10 more minutes to answer questions. I've seen a few questions come up in the chat. I have a few questions of my own, of course, as well. If there are still people with questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. On the top of your screen, there's this little emoji with a hand next to it. You can use that to raise your hand so I can give you the word to ask a question. There's a few specific questions for some of our speakers. So if I have a question for you, please turn on your camera and your microphone so that you can address it on the screen. A first one that I saw pop up in the chat is for Irina. And it's someone asking if besides MD, if there are any other best available technologies for heat recovery that you know of. So do you know if what other technologies would be available or viable for heat recovery? Irina.
Thank you very much, Mario, for the question, and also thank you very much for the question coming from the audience. What I've seen in literature to use as technologies to recover heat is usually through heat exchangers, and also through plate heat exchangers or heating pipes or different technologies like the organic Rankine cycle, and also the conversion of heat directly to electrical energy. But I would say that it really depends on the availability of the heat, also on the corrosion potential of the stream, and that will determine what kind of materials and what kind of application this stream can be implemented. I hope that gives an answer to the question.
Thanks, Irina. I think the question was from Thomas, if I remember correctly. Can't find it in the chat now. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free. Okay, he says thanks a lot. Perfect. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you.
Then I had a question from Wolfgang for Ben. So Ben, maybe you can turn on your camera again. Wolfgang, correct me if I get this your question wrong. You typed weight loss determined after pickling ? I'm not sure if I understand the question. Maybe Ben understands the question, or you can ask for clarification.
Maybe I did not. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can precise my question. You determined weight loss after you determined corrosion after weight loss. Did you use a pickling solution for the determination of the weight loss, or did you just mechanically remove the oxide layer?
I used a chemical solution together with Facon. There was a short publication about cleaning of magnetite layers with a chemical solution, HCl, and I also dosed an inhibitor I got from a manufacturer to be sure that the steel underneath did not corrode. And during this solution, I measured iron content to see whether the dissolved iron was stable. Then I took out this coupon and then stifled it with ammonia water, and then I measured the weight.
Okay, did you? Okay, thank you.
Wolfgang, you know where to find Ben if you have any additional questions. I'm sure you have his email address somewhere. Thank you, Ben.
Sure.
I also saw a question from Peter van Hartingsveld passing by about the CPU system and polishing techniques. We did not look into that specifically in this project, but we have in the improved project. So after the questions during the break, I'll copy paste the improved website into the chat, so people who are curious about those results can have a look there. Irina also referred to that in her presentation. All of the results from that project are available online on the website that I'll give you guys in a bit. I'm wondering which other questions I'm going to ask, because I have a few written down. Maybe a general one for Xue. So how well can we, so you looked into one specific plant, so you took samples at one specific plant. How general are your conclusions now? How do you think this can translate to the industry in general? Peter also touched upon that, of course, but do you think there's a lot of variability, or do you think this is a good reference for the industry in general?
Okay, I think that's a good question. As I also introduced my work package into two parts, so I also want to comment on those two parts. Like for the first one is the breakdown products of FFA products. I think for that result is more as can be used as a more general information to more other type of steam water systems. Yeah, because the breakdown is related to the temperature pressure. So I think that's also helpful for other types of plants. But for the second one, the overview of the organic carbons in the system, then maybe it's of course more for like for example in our case it's more related to ammonia plants, the steam system used in ammonia plants. Yeah, because the main organic carbons, methanol, is actually from the production side. But of course, if your steam water system is connected to other type of production site, then I would suggest you to look into for example, the side products of that production process, and then to see if it can really goes into your system or not.
Okay, that's clear. And if so, does that? So, what would you recommend to industry if they want to implement something like you've done in this research? Do you think each plant should implement these kinds of analysis every year, every month, maybe? How would you tackle that?
Yeah, for that, I think the frequency or the ideal frequency should be very low, because it really takes a lot of effort to do all the sampling first of all, and then analysis for different techniques. So I would suggest if you want to have a clear overview of the plant, then this is the tool that you can use. Or when you want to re-evaluate certain units of your system, then you can maybe use the techniques, but maybe focus more on that area instead of the whole plant. So maybe, yeah, that's some suggestions regarding that.
Great. Thank you, Xue. I see Wolfgang has raised his hand. Wolfgang, go ahead if you have another question.
I would like to give a small comment to Yu's reply. I think you cannot conclude straightforward to all and each film-forming amine containing product in the world, because don't forget, in this project we had also a combination of the film former and alkalizer and an emulsifier. So if you have a product that is based only on film-forming amine itself as such, without any alkalizer, you for sure have a different behavior than in this case.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. I think that was most of the questions. I see there were some interesting discussions and talk about interesting literature going on in the chat as well. So that's great. Keep that coming as well. But I suggest we go into the break now. So we have a 10-minute break before we listen to Wilfried Spierenberg and his presentation. So we'll see everyone back here in 10 minutes, so at 2:45. Right.
Iedereen weer terug?
Yes, Niels.
Heel goed.
Niels is very ready to start again.
Sure.
So we have the program. We had the program here. So as you have seen, the next part of our program is a guest presentation, and then we have a bit of a panel discussion planned. First of all, Wilfried, while I introduce you, can you please try and share your screen so we can make sure that that works? So our guest presentation will be given by Wilfried Spierenberg. It's about an RCA case on a steam generation plant. And Wilfried's been working in the process industry since 1984, first as a counseling engineer on energy matters in the food industry, and then as a field test engineer in the petrochemical industry. At the moment, he's associated with LyondellBasell and responsible for utilities improvement. And if I understood correctly, he's responsible for that everywhere besides the North of America. So Wilfried, thank you very much for being here and for giving us this presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, you did introduce me wonderfully. Can't improve on that. So let's just do a short introduction on LyondellBasell. LyondellBasell is a petrochemical company, makes chemicals, polymers, advanced polymers, fuel additives, and also licenses technology. You can find us at a lot of places around the world. Let's start close by house. You find us in Rotterdam. You find us in Wesseling. That's where I'm stationed, in principle. We're in England. We're also in France, in Italy. For some reason, we are not shown to be in Brindisi and Ferrara, where we have also quite important plants. Our research is in Ferrara. And then my colleague, who is housed in Houston, we've got quite a lot of industry here in the Houston area. I don't know if you've ever been there, but from here to there, it's one big petrochemical park. So that's about LyondellBasell. Now, Niels asked me to tell you about an RCA I did on a non-inorganic problem we had, and that is the case of steam with high acid conductivity. For me, the first time I ran into that, I did not understand what we were talking about. I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm not a chemic engineer. I'm just a process engineer. So if you look at a condensate, which might contain carbon dioxide and ammonia to get the pH corrected, and carbon dioxide as a fouling agent, let's say, then in condensate, the first location where you have condensate, the carbon dioxide will dissolve in water, reduce the pH, and then it will create corrosion. Other ions will also give problems like that. But if you've got ammonia in there, your conductivity is mainly ammonia. So you want to have your conductivity below 0.2 microsiemens, and if you have copper in your system, you want the ammonia to below 0.6 ppm. There is a document, but there are of course many documents on this item. But I took a document from this guy about cation conductivity, whereby with the cation exchange you remove all the ammonia, and then you can have a look at the other information that's in there for reading. But this is your conductivity with the ammonia, and this is conductivity if you have removed all the ammonia, and this is even better. This is if you have removed all the carbon dioxide as well, which you should have done in your degassing system. So what was our problem? We have an installation with a boiler feed water buffer and a boiler feed water network, and we have two main steam production plants. We have a site that is divided in a few parts. That is, but you have at LyondellBasell where you buy up all industries and take parts here and part there. So we have an east and a west side, or a north and a south side. So we have a steam production unit which produces saturated steam. Then we have a superheater, and after the superheater we have the steam system. And on, let's call it the northern side, we have several plants that use the steam. Some of those plants make steam from waste heat recovery, and they do their own conditioning with phosphates, with ammonia, with whatever else you can find. You've heard a lot of possibilities today. Some have steam production from waste gas incineration. You can have a look at our bottleneck site, where from the propylene oxide production produces waste. But that's what you get if you have a plant with a catalyst. You also get waste, not only the material you want. And that steam can go back into the steam network, but the steam can also go to other plants directly. And of course, plants can also produce condensate that can go back to the other plants. And that condensate comes from reboilers, heat exchangers, turbines, from dilution steam and process reaction water. Dilution steam, as we have heard, can also be taken out of the process stream and returned back as steam. But then you must make sure that you have removed all your process material. On the other side of the site, we have another steam system, exactly the same buildup, of course, with a steam producing unit, a steam network, and other plants. And the condensate is from there returned to the polishing plant, the condensate recovery system. Of course, we try to recycle more than 90% of our condensate because it has an energy content, and it has, of course, better quality than fresh water. Fresh water that we use needs to be demineralized, needs to have its carbon dioxide removed. And of course, somewhere we have a pump set, either as we have in Westerling in the bottom of the borders of the River Rhine. So we use Rhine water, which has been filtered already by the riverbed. And elsewhere we just have a canal where we take water from. All of this system makes sure that we have clean boiler feed water to bring into the system without carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, that's not always functioning as well as we want. So what happened? We were having a rest evening, the Friday evening. Things like this always happen at Friday evening for some reason. The situation was normal. All variables were within spec. We had normal steam flow, normal steam temperatures, no conductivity problems, no pH problems. Perhaps I should have a look at what all our measurements are. This is from our French plant, one of the French plants. We have raw water. We measure the quality of that water after we have filtered it in a sand filter. So that is the most of the non-dissolved stuff is being removed. And then we have a degassing for the carbon dioxide. And we go to the demineralizing ion exchange units. Afterwards, we only measure the pH and the resulting hardness. And as we have also turbines, we measure also the silicium oxide. We've got return condensate where we measure the pH, we measure the total hardness, silicium oxide, phosphate, and iron. And then we go to the boiler. And in this case, we use carbohydrazine as an oxygen scavenger. And we also have some cooling towers. They get water that has been through the filters. So from the gas unit, we measure the values there. We go into the boiler, we make saturated steam, and then we have the users. But before the users, we also have the superheater. So we have, for the saturated steam, the measurement of conductivity and the acid conductivity. The direct conductivity is also measured here to see whether or not we have carryover. Carryover can be for two big differences in steam flow, but it can also be from, for example, if we have oil contamination in our condensate and we put ammonia in, then we have a lot of foam, and the foam will go into our saturated steam system and will destroy our superheaters. Here we have 5 boilers, one of a cogen, and the others are boilers where we burn natural gas, oil, and waste materials. So that's a bit standard what is being measured. All of this is also reported in standard systems. So everything was all right on Friday at 7 o'clock, just before dinner time. And then there was an alarm because the conductivity, the acid conductivity was going up. We want to have an acid conductivity at 25 degrees that's less than 0.2, and normally we run at 0.1. Unfortunately, it rose to 1, which is way too high. So we were having the risk of losing the magnetite layers, and that for all steam systems. So the immediate action was, we have fouling in our boiler water, contaminated. We're going to blow down the boilers and we are going to check the instrumentation. There are quite a lot of happenings that have instrumentation as a problem. Maybe that your instrumentation is giving a too high value. Maybe that the instrumentation is not online, and all those sorts of things may result in wrong actions. So the first thing every operator does is, if he gets a value that's not normal, check the instrumentation. But in this case, we also checked all the water production values in the production plant. 2 hours later, the secondary boiler system also had high conductivity on acid. The value was not as high as on the first boiler system, but still it was higher. So also the second one went to high blowdown. That means, of course, if you go to high blowdown, you have a lot of energy increase in your boiler burners because you get colder water there. 30 minutes later, we decided that we wanted to have analysis of all plant water stations and do that by our own laboratory. So the expectation was that we would have information on that back in an hour. And we started to isolate the condensate from all plants, which means that we lost a lot of water, and the water production plant had to up its production. We would have extra energy, extra chemicals, extra cooling. And all of this on a Friday evening. We found no abnormal results on our own water plant, so the water plant was right, but we did find a high conductivity on the return condensate buffer. Therefore, condensate probably was the problem. We started calling around to the control rooms of all the plants. And we found that if they had abnormal production conditions, or if they knew other causes that would result in contaminated condensate. And we started taking samples at the battery limit of all plants. There are sampling points, especially for that reason. We have a site laboratory that is running 24 hours each day for processing, quality testing, etc. But to do the complete test, they would have some time. They needed 5 hours to do that. But also there, no specific results, except one plant group has an endo material causing high acid conductivity. So that's the plant group that we started to check more on. After 30 hours, the condensate system was clean again. The plant had stopped those actions that they thought that could cause the problem, and we could reduce blowdown. So that means that we've had almost 30 hours of high energy and high chemical. That's quite a lot of money going down the drain. At T+45, we knew we could start our condensate system back up, and it was decided almost after the weekend to start an RCA. And it took some time before we got the information back from the plants, because they need to have their internal systems running, and from plant manager down to operator, check what was being gone. And one of the plants reported back that they had done a process steam capture test with condensate overflow to the standard condensate recovery system. But we still needed to do an RCA on finding out why this happened and what to do the next time to prevent us having almost 50 hours of condensate loss. So we started doing an RCA. For doing an RCA, you must try to get to a certain result, quality of the result. And the quality of the result you can measure by where you are going to take corrective action. And the corrective action location you can use this schematic for, which is a representation of the life cycle of, well, almost anything. So you start with designing and you engineer it and you construct it and you have material in there. And after all this has been done correctly, you have a good equipment. Then you're going to have to use that equipment. You have operating procedures, and in those operating procedures you have management priorities. We'll get back to that later. And also you have, of course, humans working in that system. Once you get in this part of the process diagram, you may run into problems of finding a guy that you're going to sack for what he did wrong. But that means that you will only remove one small influence of a problem. The higher you go into this system, the wider the effect, the better the effect, and the longer term your correction will be. Then, of course, you have an RCA team. And I think I'll have time for that. The old Romans already had a very good idea on how to analyze a program. They used quis, quid, ubi, per quos, quotients, quo, quomodo, quando. In the analysis phase, you have to look at whom does it concern, who is being hit, what goes wrong, how are you getting hit, where does that happen, where is this hitting taking place, where does it come from, who is hitting you, how often does it happen, why does it happen, how does it happen, and when does it happen. This is a bit more than just the 5 whys. And you also can use the same thing for the solution, and this is also something that you need to define who needs to be in a team. You need to have people in the team who can answer these questions, and you need to have people in your team who can do something about it. That's what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, who will have to do the actual work, etc., etc. So if you have this tackled, then you know that you need a facilitator, somebody who is independent and knows how to do an RCA. You need to have somebody who is responsible. If you put these two in one person, then you may run into problems because you're not free to think So the responsible person is a link to local people and stakeholders, and you need participants, those who know what happened and the circumstances leading to the event. There is a tool set that is based on the root cause investigator methodology. You can find those by Endeavour. They taught me the system. And this tool set has an agenda, a fishbone diagram, a brainstorm diagram, an action list, the root cause analysis or the unknown cause analysis methodology, a report template, zero investment solutions brainstorm and evaluation system, and document for observations and some reference cards to use. Brainstorming is a very important part of doing a root cause analysis, because if you start a root cause analysis with a team that has seen the problem, if you have a recurring problem many times, then everybody in that team already knows what is wrong and already knows what the solution should be, at least by their reference. So you need to make those brains free to think. You need those people to put their thoughts on paper, discuss it, and then you can go and do a analysis on what's really going on. You have to free the brains. We have already the timeline. That's the next step that you do, and then you go for a cause brainstorm. And in this case, you do something like a process hazard analysis for the chemicals that you have and the equipment that you have. What media are available in the system? So we've got the utilities, we've got the plants. Plants have products, they have also byproducts, and they have all supporting media. Cycles in the plant for extracting material A, material B, etc. And you have to think on how material can enter into the condensate stream. We already talked about conditioning the steam and the boiler feed water and the boiler water, so you've got direct contact. But you also have saturation systems, you have the dilution steam recovery systems, you have produced water. Superheated steam that you bring into a heat exchanger will not use that heat exchanger efficiently. You will lose a lot of surface for your heat exchanger to bring the gas, but superheated steam is down to the condensing temperature, and then it uses the heat from condensation. But if you saturate the steam by bringing boiler feed water in there, the heat exchanger can be lots smaller. So you can have leaks from the process side into the steam system. And usually steam systems are at the higher pressure as process systems. But if they are cold, for example, if you have a temperature of a pressure or a level control on your heat exchanger, then the pressure where the condensate is generated, and therefore the pressure on the steam side, can be lower than the pressure on the process side, and you may well get a leak into your steam system. Heat exchangers that are standby, if you have example fouling process material in a distillation column, and you have 3 boilers that you will change over and have to clean, then if they are cold, they have a low pressure. And you know, steam that goes to 60 degrees Celsius only has a partial pressure of 0.2 bars. So it is still quite warm before the pressure is so low that you can get problems. Condensers, of course, are cold anyway. And then you have installation of new equipment that may have cleaning agents on the surface, that may have coatings on the surface, or that may even have still conditioning material on the surface. Those are all ways that can bring whatever material you got into your condensate system. And then you've got, of course, the operational errors. If you've done the brainstorm, in principle, you know where and what to look for. So you can take data from a data historian. Looks like this. Need some extra massaging to get the items in there that you want to have for your work. In this case, you have 1 month before the event to 100 hours after the event in this data set. And if you look at conductivities here, and here, and here, and here, you got quite a few peaks before the actual problem moment. That's I think in here. This needs some work, but we knew that we had definitely one plant that had a likely cause, because one started shortly before the runtime through the system to the superheater. If you look at the whole system, you have plants, you have condensate, and the condensate goes back to the buffer tank. And before it is mixed up in this buffer tank with the rest of the waters, and it's been through the polishing tank and the degassing tank, and it's been through the boiler feed water buffer tank and into the steam system, a few hours have passed normally. So you have to check quite a long time before you start with that. So we need to discuss the general causes that we had, and in the end, the fact that we had operators working on a new system and were not aware that what they were working on could come and get into our boilers, clearly means that the fact that we have complex systems with complex equipment that is separated in plant sections, in plants, in the site, in surrounding equipment, that we have organizational complexities in operations, in maintenance, and projects, in procurement. And we also have people complexities. You have a level of development, but you have also got direction or training or specialities. I mean, the way I think about things, I'm a mechanical engineer, is completely different than the way from an electrical engineer or a chemical engineer looks. Also means, from my own experience, if I look for a solution, it's going to be a mechanical solution. And if you want a problem in a reactor, then it's a good idea to take a chemical engineer and let him think about the problem as well, because it may well be a more simple solution than adding mechanical equipment to a reactor. And then, of course, you have culture. And I'm not only talking about the culture of Germany versus France or the Netherlands, but they also talk about different cultures of the type of plant you have. I've seen that if you have a small plant, a food plant, for example, that runs from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening, and then starts a cleaning cycle, you got a completely different culture of failures than you have if you have a plant like our big plants, like a cracker, that has to run for 4 years or 6 years or 8 years without stopping. So those cultural effects will also complex the systems that you have to talk about. And usually you are talking about non-intended changes that cause problems. A new system test, which may need more thinking about by all people involved, and also probably needs involvement for people that are not yet involved. Introduction of new chemicals will also result in non-intended effects. So you will have to have process operations and procedures to take care of all those things. And you have to have detection methods in place to see that what's going to happen will impact you or not. So we normally have temperature, flow, conductivity, pH on a condensate, but you may have to add TOC measurements. And the question there is, of course, what happens if you have very stable carbon that does not break down in your TOC measurement, or if you have non-carbon systems like hydrogen or, well, I don't know, whatever. So the conclusions of the RCA was that we had a source in the plant and that the steam process capture was the cause of fouling. And this, of course, was a technical conclusion. We needed also to go a bit higher in the system. We needed to improve the training for management, engineers, operators, and technicians. We needed to further the local cleaning of reuse condensate for this site. We needed to improve the MOC. And when we look back at the RCA results, we found knowledge need to be shared for PHAs, and we have to check how large our system is. The system is not just the reactor in a plant, it's not just this, the plant itself, it's the whole site. So if we do a PHA, we need to check steam systems, condensate systems, boiler feed water systems, users and suppliers. Same goes, by the way, for all the other utilities that are transported over the system. We need to know what media, we already talked about that, are in the system, in the plants, in the utilities, what is going to be cracked if we put it through our boilers. And we have to check all the condensate locations where we can have contamination, also as already mentioned. We need to improve MOCs, the management of change procedures, not only to look at the site, not only look at the plant, but also look at the site. And we will have to look at contamination detection closer to the plant. So this is where we will look at the ISPT quality project, and I'm going to use the deliverables. So what is the classification according to our process? The PHE and the MOC are engineering and procedural solutions. The contamination detection, the first contamination detection is of course an operator procedure where operators looking at contamination in the plant remark to our operators in the control room of the utility systems that they have detected the contamination. Now, the reason they didn't do that in this case is that so far higher conductivity has already been detected on a regular basis in the condensate and was always tackled by the condensate cleaning plant without problem. Unfortunately, this time it didn't work out. Are there any questions on that?
Thank you very much, Wilfried, for this presentation. And I really appreciate the unique way of presenting. I've never seen this before. It's very easy to follow, actually. It's very nice. I think you make a good point, or I really like how you integrate how these issues arise, not just from the process, but from historical development of these processes and complexity and the people that work around it. So much appreciated. There is time for maybe one question. There was one in the chat, so I'll read that to you. It's from David Moot from Evides Industriewater, who asked somewhere in the beginning, 90% return condensate return is quite impressive for a petrochemical steam water system. What percentage is clean turbine or reboiler condensate, and how much is off-spec process condensate? Was a question that David asked. David, feel free to elaborate if it's necessary.
Hello, David.
Hi, Wilfried. You put it quite well. So yeah, exactly the question as Marjolein posted. It's how much of it would be the relatively clean turbine and reboiler condensate.
Well, in this case, we've learned our lesson in the past on using process condensate as input for steam systems. So that's usually not being done. So that was also the new system we were trying to test, or the plant was trying to test, a new process steam conditioning system with the idea to bring it back into the system. But that would then be process steam. And that's a different cycle for us.
Okay, so initially the difference wasn't really made that much, but now there is more distinction being made between condensate that is more likely to be contaminated and the ones that are likely to be absolutely clean enough.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I have more questions, but I'll save them for the panel, Marjolein.
Thanks. Wolfgang, you raised your hand. Maybe for a last question for Wilfried. Wolfgang? If you're already
still muted.
You're still muted.
Sorry, you are not a you are not a fortune teller. Sorry for that. Do you follow the system of the VGB guidelines for steam purity with the action level system, or do you have developed your own system at your group?
Well, we've got quite a lot of plants, and all those plants have their own history. So there are plants, especially German plants, that use the VGB system. The Verein der Großenergiebetreiber. But in America, we use the S-ray system, and in France, I must say, I wouldn't know. Je ne sais pas.
C'est la France. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the questions. Thank you very much, Wilfried, for this presentation. Stick around because we're heading into the panel discussion now. So I'd like to ask all of our panel members to turn on their camera so that you're visible. And maybe Wilfried, if you can stop sharing, then we can share the list of panel members. I think that would be good to see. So I will introduce all of our panelists, and afterwards I will ask them to just briefly tell us what stuck with them about this project, whether you are involved or not. I think that would be great, but I'll introduce you first so you have a minute to think about what you want to say afterwards. So Wilfried I've introduced already, so I'll skip that. And then we have Arne Verliefde, whom I know very well for the last 10 years because he's my promoter at UGent. Ghent. So he's a professor there specialized in physicochemical water treatment and also co-founder of the Capture platform and promoter of the chair that we have with Evides Industriewater. He holds a PhD from TU Delft and KWR. Then we have someone we've heard a few times already today, Wolfgang Hater, who is a water treatment expert who is closely involved in this project as well. And next we have Edwin Muller, who works at Shell, but started as a water treatment specialist at KEMA in 2001, worked at Bureau Veritas at KWR, and the effect of organics in boiler water has always played a role in his career. So in 2012, he joined Shell as a cold utilities engineer focusing on water treatment and integration, and for the past 3 years, he's been the asset support engineer for upstream water treatment. But apparently he still has enough freedom to work on other projects outside of that discipline, so that's always very nice. And then last but not least, in this list of panel members, we have David Moot, who is currently a team leader in research and development at Evides Industriewater, where he manages the R&D portfolio for process, daemon, and cooling and wastewater. And he also has a PhD from TU Delft. So those are our 5 panelists. While I was preparing this, it stuck to me that it's 5 guys again, but I'll be the female force here, I guess, which should be fine. But we need more women in the field, I'd say, but maybe that's not a good first discussion point. So as I said, I'd like you all to take a minute to just briefly state what has stuck with you from today or from the project if you were involved, and then we'll go into some more detailed discussion. Wilfried, if it's okay, I'll start with you. You were not involved in the project, but I think it's very close to your field of expertise and activity. So,
dankjewel. I know of FFA's and a few other of those methods. What I know is that we need more penetration into the industry, and I must say that Dow and Chemelot are at the forefront here. I found it very hard to get changes of conditioning for steam and condensate accepted. That is because the chemical industry is, I should say, rightly so, very conservative. And it was very good to see people working on new processes and what those effects are. And yes, I'm going to really try and disseminate this information.
That's very good to hear. Thank you very much. Arne, tell me, what did you remember?
Well, maybe one thing that still strikes me is that if you look at the risk reward and the potential consequences of, well, not only catastrophic, but just simple failures or shutdowns or whatever, And if you then look at the cost of better detection tools, better analysis tools, well, I wonder where the balance is, and I don't think it's in the correct place at the moment. But of course, I'm not the manager of a petrochemical plant.
That's true, but interesting remark anyway. I see a common thread in a lot of these remarks and the chat already, so we'll have a lot to discuss soon. Wolfgang, tell me.
Yeah, maybe I give 1 or 2 words to my history, why I am here in this panel. I have been working until April at Kurita Water Industries, and I've been in charge of R&D and technical support. And I've been working in this project, in this ISPT project, with 4 years. And Kurita is a supplier of film-forming amine products, and that was the reason why Kurita was involved. I have been asked to join the panel discussion, but I cannot call myself anymore a Kurita member. Please understand that. Yeah, so I'm a little bit in a hybrid situation. What I was, let me say, what was very striking for me is that there is a big difference between theory and practice. So if you look at all the guidelines, there is a holy grail of acid conductivity or cationic conductivity after cation exchange or cation conductivity, and this limit is mainly driven by the turbine manufacturers, according to my knowledge. And I'm not sure that this absolute value that is developed by the as much as possible and not as much as needed principle is really always economic. But for sure now, companies who produce turbines will crucify me, but I'm used to that. Yeah, the discussion is quite complicated because there's a complicated story with that, and meanwhile there are some guidelines on the application of film-forming amine that gives practical hints to suppliers, and which are very helpful. And which are also meant in the panel discussion that let me say help a lot to have a more realistic approach. Yeah, that was my comment. And let me say there were a lot of detailed information, but the basic findings that you can apply film-forming amines in a safe way and that they provide benefits. Yeah, okay. It was not needed to convince me on that.
But now you have more ammo to convince others.
Yeah, we will see.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Edwin, you were also not closely related or closely involved in the project. What has stuck with you this last hour? Please unmute yourself first so we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, well, actually, I was involved only the past few days when I was asked to replace some colleagues, but it all looked very familiar. And the first thing that struck me is that we start at the right point, and that's at investigating measurements, getting the data right, and that is something that's always very difficult to convince people of. I remember working in Pernis a few years ago, and one discussion was, well, we want to introduce more measurements. And our manager said, well, one non-return valve in Pernis costs about a Volkswagen Golf. And for one measuring device, we are roughly at 3 Volkswagens. But when we did introduce this measurement, as a result, we could move a boiler away from phosphate treatment to more modern amine treatment, and that was the big gain. That I think these 100,000 euros for a simple pH measurement were won back within a few years with a more reliable installation. And filming amines will be a long way for Shell at the moment. We're already proud that we are getting rid of phosphate. And the main thing that's unknown for us is what is the interaction with our end product. suppose we use steam in a chemical process, what happens to organic chemicals, to our catalyst? And well, we don't use the steam simply to produce electricity. We use it everywhere on the site.
Thank you very much. So again, we'll have enough stuff to discuss in a bit, I'm 100% sure. But first, David, what has stuck with you from the project?
Well, from the Evides Industriewater point of view, we were most certainly the most interested in the, well, let's say the benefits or the potential benefits of trying to reuse condensate, off-spec condensates at the point where it is actually discharged. So much closer to the process. That was our initial interest, and well, what has been shown is that it's most certainly possible, but that's the way we have chosen to investigate now. Some post-treatment is needed. I think it also brings up a very interesting panel topic, but I'll leave that for now. From my personal point of view, I was very pleased with the work that Ben did on showing what the actual, well, at least what the influence is on the magnetite layer formation of the introduction of FFAs. And there was, let's say, an open question for a long time. And having that verified, or at least having some of the research questions answered, that yeah, gives a lot of new insights.
Thank you very much, David. I'm curious for your panel topic, but we'll indeed leave that to a bit later. Because I've noticed in all of the answers now, and also in a bit of a discussion already going on in the chat, that there seems to be one common, I'm not sure if I have to call it a challenge or a frustration, is that even, I think most people here are convinced of the more modern techniques, the application of FFA, all of these kind of things, but that we're talking about an industry that is maybe a bit conservative, or that the processes are very complicated. It's very hard to get these things actually introduced into industry. Arne, I think you're one of the instigators of the discussion in the chat. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, but how do we tackle that? How do we overcome that?
Yeah, it's I would say it started off as an academic question, but it goes much further in the sense that there's a lot of things, and Wolfgang, you rightly point out, there's a big difference between theory and practice. But also from the investigation side, how can you actually make sure that you convince somebody who's relatively conservative, and we're talking about the turbine people, which data would you actually need to convince them that it's right? I mean, and that was one of the reasons why we started, for example, with the Improved project as well. I mean, if you simulate a process and you can actually prove in a simulated parallel process that there is no problem at all, I mean, how does that more or less help convince a turbine supplier? And of course, there's the warranty aspect. But is there a way to actually overcome this? That's a continuing question that I have.
David, indeed, for all the panelists, by the way, if you like to say or add something, you can either press the raise your hand button or physically raise your hand. I can see all of you, so that also works. So David, go ahead.
I believe that unfortunately, and this might be a bit of a downer, of course, from the perspective that we are now taking from ISPT project, no amount of lab or pilot data will be able to convince a turbine manufacturer. I think what we'll be able to convince them, perhaps in years to come, is more and more adaptation, not adaptation, adoption of the chemistry by, well, some sites such as Geleen, but others as well, which produces real life evidence. And I'm not saying that the results of a study like this are not helping. What they will help with is adoption by certain end users, but it will not. I fear that it will not be able to convince Siemens, for instance. Not instantly. I think you need more for that. But I'm curious what the others think about that.
Wolfgang, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a couple of discussions with turbine manufacturers, and Siemens is a well-known company. I think everybody knows them. And I had a discussion with one of the persons who had been in this water treatment expert group, and we had a discussion on why is Siemens so reluctant to accept deviation from their steam purity specifications, because finally it is a Siemens steam purity Siemens specification that is relevant for. And it was told because their warranty that they give to the customer is related to their water steam purity specification. And if they would accept a deviation from that, their back insurance would tell them in case of a damage, we don't pay.
Yeah. And
of course, it's a matter of risk minimization. And for many, many years, all of organic chemistry has been like garlic to the vampire. Yeah. Yeah. And it took already a lot of years to until we finally we managed to get an organization to have a more serious look into this organic cycle chemistry. And this is IAPS that has now also issued 2 guidance documents on film forming substance and film forming amine. The difference is only whether you disclose the chemistry or not. Of course, to talk for a non-disclosed chemistry, it is a little bit difficult. Yeah. What has been noticed that in an industrial plant like in Dow, you have organics coming from the process that are almost, that in many cases prevent to be in line with the specs. And also, I know some papers where the people report about continuous exceeding this in some plants, the specs, and there is always a kind of there a dilemma. You don't want to invest anything, and you know for many years that it works. So, but this is maybe a question that some plant operators can delineate more better than me. Yeah. Okay. Now I stop. Otherwise.
Thanks, Wolfgang. Wilfried.
Yes, I understand. For improving our measurement equipment, you will probably find that all of industry, especially our higher management at our industry, are willing to get that in. They are very well aware that if you do not measure it, you will not know it. In LyondellBasell, we are working on global performance measurement systems. And as I'm a utility engineer, water is one of those. We've got a global water quality dashboard, which was, by the way, built by my colleague, John Vernon, where we gather all the process data from all our water plants. We are also going to add to that the wastewater plants, because that's, of course, a very important item. But, and that's the big point, we are a risk-based investment industry. And we want to evade risks. And if we put in something new that will reduce cost by, I don't know, 5 million a year, 10 million a year, 100 million a year, that's okay. However, if that system causes a shutdown of a plant, or if we talk about our main steam systems of a site for 2 days, then we lose that money. And you do not want to do that. It's not as simple as that. I do not want to do that. I don't want to lose that kind of money. I don't have it. And I think there have been sites where a lot of research has been done in plants, where they stopped doing the research and found out that by not running at 120% of the standard process capacity of the plant, but at 95%, they had a stable process and more product per year. So yes, we want to improve our systems. Yes, we want to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Yes, we want to reduce water use, etc. But changing chemicals may be risky, and we will wait until somebody else has done it. And then, of course, if you look at carbon dioxide and water reduction, water is stressful in a lot of parts of the world. Mm-hmm. Most of the chemical industry is placed in a location where there is water in abundance. If you look at Houston area, plenty of water. If you look at Rotterdam, where we are, plenty of water. Still, Dow is at a water site that still imports water from far away and uses reduced water, a lot of extra water from recycling. What we see is if we reduce carbon dioxide emissions by integrating heat systems, by using processes that make less waste heat, then we reduce the biggest water user of our chemical plants, and those are the cooling systems. If we reduce almost all the heat that we put in the ovens of a cracker, then we reduce enormously the amount of heat that is needs to be removed from the process of that cracker, because all our products come in cold and leave the site cold. So, yeah, that shows where our focus, in my opinion, should be.
Yeah, it's very clear. Arna, did you want to add anything to that? You've had your hand up for a while.
I actually have an immediate follow-up question on that, because if you look at it from really, again, a theoretical point of view, the best way to make a site, a petrochemical site, more sustainable is to go to much more decentralized, let's say, usage of water. Because there's a lot more that you can do if you recover it, recycle it, whatever, close to the source. However, there's two problems with that. Well, first of all, there's the conservatism again, and the divide between process and utilities. And the second one, and that's a problem that we encounter everywhere, is spatial planning. You're encountering history. There's a lot of there has been a lot of building, a lot of things are already in place, and it's not so easy to turn around. So my question would be, if you actually look at the current state of a lot of petrochemical plants, is it actually possible with the current layout to go to a very sustainable operation or not? Or should we just make tabula rasa, which is of course not feasible from an economic point of view, but is it basically not too far-fetched to want to go for extreme circularity in these plants? Is it even possible?
No takers? Well, okay, I'll take it. We can go far, yes, but if you look at the plants that are in Europe now, those are plants 40 to 60 years old. If you look at plants in the Houston area, you have even plants of 100 years old. For each and every new plant, you should go for maximum integration and learn there what you can use in the old plants. Then you will probably have an economically feasible way of doing it. If you start changing all those plants, you must also realize that putting in new equipment is also carbon dioxide, but also water use. And you must take that complete cycle into consideration if you want to change things. But I agree, we have to change.
Edwin, I'd love to hear your input.
Yes, well, it sounds familiar. Well, Shell is very conservative when it comes to changes. Even if we buy an ice cream car, we need a development release. And I think that's essential to the oil industry, because if we do make changes, we really want to make sure that it's safe. Well, as speaking for Pernis, most steam turbines are rather old. I don't see many new ones coming, so they are not into warranty, but nevertheless, changing the chemistry there, that's really a careful process. Where I do see challenges, and especially also in water quality, is in the new sites we are building in the Middle East. What you see recently is that we used to desalinate water from the Persian Gulf. Very easy process. You take either an RO or an MED. You produce fresh water, and the brine goes back into the Gulf. So at the moment, you see that salt level in the areas near the coast is rising. So it's getting more difficult to use that water. Where do we use water for in the Middle East? An important one is enhanced oil recovery. We produce steam or water, put that in an oil field. Oil comes out, well, with water. That water, again, we have to clean to get rid of it. And the challenge will be in the future that we take that water and use that as a starting point for our boilers, for our cooling systems, instead of pumping variable drinking water from the coast to the area. And then we have all kinds of salts, all kinds of organics, and it's I think the organics we're talking about now in this research will be kids' play compared with what we are encountering in the future.
I think so too, indeed. Our time is running out, but I would love to finish with an interesting question in the chat. Actually, Kees was beat me to the punch because I also wrote it down. And I'd love to hear from our quote-unquote outsiders first. But this project is now ending. We've talked about a few challenges in the last couple of minutes. If we would formulate a follow-up project, if we would go into a next ISPT project to help industries improve their steam and condensate quality, what do you think we should focus on? Who do you think we should involve? Should we involve these turbine manufacturers potentially? So Wilfried or Edwin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think maybe a digital twin-like construction would be interesting for this. We have done calculations based on research by David in the past, in which we took our dosing of chemicals, of the amines, their breakdown products, and the steam that is resulting from that. Well, you can then calculate a pH, a conductivity, and an effect on what it looks like on your turbine. And what you see in that model is that if you use ammonia, you get the acid enrichment effect, in which you have organic acids which cause a pH drop in the first blades. Some organic amines give the opposite effect. You get a small peak before you go to the actual pH. If we would have a predictive model that would combine our measurements and calculate from that a situation, what does my steam turbine look like, even which pH is in which zone, that would be valuable. And I think we could convince turbine manufacturers with such a system as well.
Yeah, agreed, Wilfried.
So I understand that the route would be research, sell the research results to the turbine producers and the insurance companies, and then next step from them to the users of the turbines. It's a bit strange to me. My German colleague just talked about the German legislation on steam quality. We've got a DIN norm, which is an EN norm, which is now in Germany legislation. We've seen best available technologies for a lot, and I imagine that we also have best available technologies on steam and water systems. I know we have them for cooling water. That is, to be honest, the route that I would choose. Get experience in, get research in, get results, and push it through the Brussels legislation systems. if it is best available technology, then that's what it is. And talk about all turbines. Condensing turbines are the worst thing if you look at CO2, because you have 70% efficiency on the turbine, but that is only until it condenses, and the condensed heat is completely lost. So you should put, I think, legislation through that prohibits anybody from running a condensing turbine.
David, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I should elaborate on the original question of Kees, which is so I would, for me personally, if I would now draw up a follow-up, now on this very moment, I would say that the scope needs to be about not necessarily how, with which methods you treat condensate decentrally at, for instance, a unit at a certain plant or plant cluster. I would say the focus needs to be why, in general, would you want that? I think we have a much better idea of what's needed to do it, but we were, to a lesser extent, able to answer the question of why it's such a good idea to go towards decentralized treatment. It's possible, absolutely, but it of course competes with the idea of a centralized water treatment system where all the off-spec flows go to, and treating all the off-spec flows in one place and maybe recycling that instead of... what makes most sense will of course depend on the unit plant in question and what the off-spec condensate or whatever comes out, what's in it. But for me, it's not necessarily a technology question. It's more of an integrated water management question that I would like to see answered next.
Yeah. Adam, I'm sure you have thoughts on that.
Absolutely right.
No, I completely agree, and it's actually just a blue horizon idea. But do we know who the main insurance companies are for these turbine manufacturers? I mean, in the end, if you involve turbine manufacturers, if you involve insurers, if you involve the most important decision makers in the whole plant, I mean, we have to go to more integrated projects in that aspect as well, because otherwise you like it has been stated, you're never going to convince somebody with just data from a research project. So
yeah. Wolfgang, any concluding remarks from your side?
I think the majority has been said. If you think that petrochemical plants are conservative, talk to turbine manufacturers. And if you want to make it even more worse, go to nuclear plants. Because then you, but this is a completely different discussion, and I think this is a different scope. I think it's worthwhile to talk, and I think we should, the turbine manufacturer should be involved to understand their thinking, because there might be aspects that have not been at all touched by our research, and that for the point of view of a turbine manufacturer is highly important, and that has not been covered yet. So this can be only fruitful, and the outcome we will see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it very well. And in view of time, we're gonna have to close off our panel discussion. There's still a question from Henry Spaniers in the chat. Maybe one of our panel members can have a look and type an answer in the chat. That would be great. But for now, I would like to thank our panel members for their input and the interesting discussion. I think we could keep this going for hours if we'd let it, so let's not do that.
You can work your whole life in steam and water systems.
Or just water. So thank you very much, everyone. I think we're all very happy with how this webinar went in general. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you, Wilfried, again for your presentation. And I'd also like to thank, of course, everyone who presented a work package in the beginning. Irina, Sjö, Ben, Peter, thank you very much for sharing the results and sharing your view on the project. And last but not least, I would like to thank ISPT, of course, for funding this project, and Niels for being a great coordinator. I think we all had a great time the last couple of years on this project despite Corona. I think we made it work in the best way possible. There's also a digital applause, by the way, so you can do that too. And with that, I'd like to give the last word to Niels to finish off this seminar.
Hey, thank you, Marjolein. Thank you all. I mean, just a few closing words, not too much, because it was a very inspiring afternoon, I believe, with a lot of discussions and active involvement of the audience, which we cannot do without, obviously. So very pleased with that. Thank you all. Actually, you've made my job as a project leader pretty easy with all those passionate people in the team, a mix of enthusiastic young professionals doing their PhDs and experienced, highly qualified people with experience in the industry and the water technology area. So many thanks for that. Yes. Thanks to ISPT as well. Thanks to Marjolein for very well and nicely guiding us through this afternoon. And yeah, unfortunately, yeah, of course, no flowers, no apple juice, no nothing. So, but still our
no Karnemelk, Niels, cat.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that. Yeah, well, but the appreciation is nothing less than that, of course. So thanks again, and yeah, also for ISPT, for Devi, for organizing this whole session and all the pre-work she did to make that happen. Again, thank you all, especially the panelists, outside people who were involved, and all your active involvement. And hopefully we can come up with some, say, interesting follow-up based on the discussion we had today and the perspectives we see in improving these systems. Thanks again, and you have a nice evening and a nice afternoon.
I've got one last question. Link to the opgenomen, to the recording, will be shared?
Yeah, normally it should be, unless there's any objections to that. I think Debbie will share it.
Yes, I will share it with you.
I'll share my presentation as a PDF.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.